spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of Pastatime with the Scarish podcast. This is still taking me a little bit to get used to, but I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we're here to read you folks some pastas. Some creepy pastas.
Yeah, we're going to be reading some creepy pastas today. Pretty excited to do it. We're going to be covering 4 of them. We don't have a user-submitted one this week, which is fine. We had one that was in the queue, and I reached out to the person and said, hey, I just want to confirm this is a creepypasta, right? And they're like, no, this 100% happened. So I was like, oh shit, moving it back to story time. So you'll see that one next week, which will be fun. I'm going to be reading Ghost Train and Please Stay Awake tonight. So Robin, what are you going to be covering?
I'm going to be, well, I'm not covering it, but I'm going to be reading...
Thank you for correcting me.
I'm going to be reading The Rake and Smile Dog.
Smile Dog looks terrifying. When she sent me Smile Dog, there was a picture behind it, and I was just like, what the fuck is this demon? It is haunting and terrifying. So, fun stuff. I'm not sure which one of us is going to be going first.
Alrighty, so the first one I'm going to read is going to be Smile Dog, and it does have a terrifying picture to it. At least to me, I love animals, but this dog is creepy. It's like a dog with human teeth. It's terrifying. All right, so it goes. I first met in person with Mary E. in the summer of 2007. Y'all knew 2007, right?
Wow.
Oh, it's
I'm not covering this.
Oh,
that would have been
God.
hilarious if you tossed it in there.
Yeah. I graduated in 2007, so I'm here for this. All right.
I graduated in 2003, so I'm old as fuck.
I had arranged with her husband of 15 years, Terrence, to see her for an interview. Mary had initially agreed since I was not a newsman, but rather an amateur writer gathering information for a few early college assignments and, if all went according to plan, some pieces of fiction. We scheduled the interview for a particular weekend when I was in Chicago on unrelated business, but at the last moment, Mary changed her mind and locked herself in the couple's bedroom, refusing to meet with me. For half an hour, I sat with Terrence as we camped outside the bedroom door, I listening and taking notes while he attempted fruitlessly to calm his wife. The things Mary said made little sense but fit with the pattern I was expecting. Though I could not see her, I could tell from her voice that she was crying, and more often than not, her objections were speaking with me, centered around incoherent diatribe on her dreams, her nightmares. Terrence apologized profusely when we ceased the exercise, and I did my best to take it in stride. Recall that I wasn't a reporter in search of a story, but merely a curious young man in search of information. Besides, I thought at the time, I could perhaps find another, similar case if I put my mind and resources to it. Mary E. was the sysop for a small Chicago-based bulletin board system in 1992 when she first encountered smile.jpg. For those of you that don't know, JPG means JPEG, means a picture. And her life changed forever. She and Terrence had been married for only 5 months. Mary was one of an estimated 400 people who saw the image when it was posted as a hyperlink on the BBS, bulletin board system.
Oh God, BBSs. Do y'all remember those? I doubt it.
What's a BBS?
It's like way back in the day when the internet was first getting started. Like they were basically forums. They were kind of just forums that you could post stuff about.
Like Reddit?
A little bit different. Not exactly like Reddit, but if you've ever been to any other forum, the way a forum would look, it's very similar to what a BBS is.
Okay. Though she is the only one who has spoken openly about the experience. The rest have remained anonymous or, perhaps, dead. In 2005, when I was only in 10th grade, Smile.jpg was first brought to my attention by my burgeoning interest in web-based phenomena. So 2005, this person is interviewing in 2007. So 2005 was 2 years ago. They were in 10th grade. So this is like a senior project.
Gotcha.
Mary was the most often cited victim of what is sometimes referred to as smile.dog. The being, smile.jpg, is reputed to display. What caught my interest, other than the obvious macabre elements of the cyber legend and my proclivity towards such things, was the sheer lack of information, usually to the point that people don't believe it even exists other than as a rumor or hoax.
This is one of those stories that I would like to say is overwritten, where someone's like, let me try and just put as many fancy words as I can in here, even though they don't make it sound any better.
It is unique because though the entire phenomenon centers on a picture file, that file is nowhere to be found on the internet. Certainly, many photo-manipulated simulacra, lacra, what have you, litter the web, showing up with the most frequency on sites such as the image board 4chan. Is a BBS like 4chan?
Probably, yeah. I've never been to 4chan, so I wouldn't really know for sure.
Particularly the X-focused paranormal subboard. It is suspected these are fakes because they do not have the same effect the true smile.jpg is believed to have. Namely, sudden onset temporal lobe epilepsy and acute anxiety. So you see this picture and you immediately have seizures, or you're just filled with this sense of anxiety. And
it's like the brown note, how the brown note makes you shit your pants. It's just fear instead of shit.
That?
It's a picture instead of a note. Like a musical note? You've watched the episode of The League where he finds the brown note. There's also an episode of South Park where they find the brown note.
This purported reaction in the viewer is one of the reasons the phantom-like smile.jpg is regarded with such disdain, since it is patently absurd, though depending on whom you ask, the reluctance to acknowledge smile.jpg's existence might be just as much out of fear as it is out of disbelief. Neither smile.jpg nor smile.dog is mentioned anywhere on Wikipedia, though the website features articles on such other, perhaps more scandalous shock sites as, and it's a bunch of asterisks, hello.jpg or 2 girls, 1 cup. What the fuck? Any attempt to create a page pertaining to smile.jpg is summarily deleted by any of the encyclopedia's many admins. Encounters with smile.jpg are the stuff of internet legend. Mary E's story is not unique. There are unverified rumors of smile.jpg showing up in the early days of Usenet, and even one persistent tale that in 2002, a hacker flooded the forums of humor and satire website Something Awful with a deluge of smile.dog pictures, rendering almost half the forum's users at the time epileptic. It is also said that in the mid to late 90s that smile.jpg circulated on Usenet as an attachment of a chainmail with the subject line, "Smile, God loves you." What's funny about that is, when MySpace was a thing, were you ever part of those message chains that were like, if you don't pass this on, some kid is going to come, like a ghost of a kid is going to come and kill you in the middle of the night?
I think I've gotten a few of them when I was on MySpace, but I immediately would block anyone who would send it to me and delete it. I was like, this is so dumb.
Sometimes I would read through them and start getting anxiety because the idea scared me so much.
I immediately was like, I cannot fucking believe that like chainmail is going to make its way onto the e-web like verse when that happened. I remember we started getting emails like that and I would just block the senders. And then I realized a bunch of them were my friends from, like, high school who were sending that shit, like, you have to read this and pass it on, otherwise you're gonna have bad luck for 27 years.
Okay.
People are dumb, is what I'm saying.
Yet despite the huge exposure these stunts would generate, there are very few people who admit to having experienced any of them, and no trace of the file or any link has ever been discovered. Those who claim to have seen smile.jpg often weakly joke that they were far too busy to save a copy of the picture to their hard drive. However, all alleged victims offer the same description of the photo. A dog-like creature, usually described as appearing similar to a Siberian husky, illuminated by the flash of the camera, sits in a dim room, the only background detail that is visible being a human hand extending from the darkness near the left side of the frame. The hand is empty, but is usually described as, quote-unquote, beckoning. What does a beckoning hand look like to you?
Like a hand that's like curled, like saying like, come here.
Yeah. Of course, most attention is given to the dog or dog creature, as some victims are more certain than others about what they claim to have seen. The muzzle of the beast is reputedly split in a wide grin, revealing 2 rows of very white, very straight, very sharp, very human-looking teeth.
Human-looking teeth aren't necessarily sharp, though. I find that interesting.
To me, in the picture, it looks like, the dog from The Mask, when he wears the mask?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. Just giant human teeth.
Haunting. That's terrifying. The Mask was the best horror movie of my generation, so.
This is, of course, not a description given immediately after viewing the picture, but rather a recollection of the victims, who claim to have seen the picture endlessly repeated in their mind's eye during the time they are, in reality, having epileptic fits. So, while they're having these seizures, all they see is the picture of this entity, this dog-like creature. These fits are reported to continue indeterminably, often while the victims sleep, resulting in very vivid and disturbing nightmares. These may be treated with medication, though in some it is more effective than others. All right. Mary E., I assumed, was not on effective medication. That was why, after my visit to her apartment in 2007, I sent out feelers to several folklore and urban legend-oriented news groups, websites, and mailing lists, hoping to find the name of a supposed victim of Smile.jpg who felt more interested in talking about his experiences. For a time, nothing happened, and at length I forgot completely about my pursuits since I had begun my freshman year of college and was quite busy. Mary contacted me via email, however, near the beginning of March 2008. And so this email is titled Last Summer's Interview, and it goes, Dear Mr. L, I am incredibly sorry about my behavior last summer when you came to interview me. I hope you understand that it was no fault of yours, but rather my own problems that led me to act out as I did. I realize that I could have handled the situation more decorously. However, I hope you will forgive me. At the time, I was afraid. You see, for 15 years, I've been haunted by Smile.jpg. Smile.dog comes to me in my sleep every night.
So I have a quick question.
They're the same thing.
This letter, no. Thank you for answering the question I wasn't going to ask. This letter is from the person that the author went to interview, being mailed back to them. This is what I like to call Kevin Smith syndrome, where all of your characters have the exact same diction and sound like the exact same character. So I was just like, wait, I thought this was from the person he was going to interview. Why the fuck did they use the same pretentious verbiage as they do? So, okay, I will let you continue.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm with you there. All right. I know that sounds silly, but it is true. There is an ineffable quality about my dreams, my nightmares, that makes them completely unlike any real dreams I have ever had. I do not move and do not speak. I simply look ahead, and the only thing ahead of me is the scene from that horrible picture. I see the beckoning hand, and I see Smile.dog. It talks to me. It's not a dog, of course, though I am not quite sure what it really is. It tells me it'll leave me alone if only I do as it asks. All I must do, it says, is spread the word. That is how it phrases its demands, and I know exactly what it means. It wants me to show it to someone else.
7 days.
That's what I'm thinking, too. It's just like The Ring. And I could. The week after my incident, I received in the mail a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was only a 3.5-inch floppy diskette. Oh my lord.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with what that is, it's the save icon.
Computers don't even have those anymore.
Yeah, you don't even have that on your computer anymore.
Without having to check, I knew precisely what was on it. I thought for a long time about my options. I could show it to a stranger, a coworker. I could even show it to Terrence, as much as the idea disgusted me. And what would happen then? Well, if Smile.dog kept its word, I could sleep. Yet if I lied, what would I do? And who was to say something worse would not come for me if I did as the creature asked? So I did nothing for 15 years, though I kept the diskette hidden amongst my things. Every night for 15 years, Smile.dog has come to me in my sleep and demanded that I spread the word. For 15 years, I have stood strong, though there have been hard times. Many of my fellow victims on the BBS board where I first encountered Smile.jpg stopped posting. I heard some of them committed suicide. Others remained completely silent, simply disappearing off the face of the web. They are the ones I worry about the most. I sincerely hope you will forgive me, Dr. L, but last summer when you contacted me and my husband about an interview, I was near the breaking point. I decided I was going to give you the floppy diskette. I did not care if Smile.dog was lying or not. I wanted it to end. You were a stranger, someone I had no connection with, and I thought I would not feel sorrow when you took the diskette as part of your research and sealed your fate.
Oh, dick move. Just saying.
Before you arrived, I realized what I was doing. I was plotting to ruin your life. I could not stand the thought, and in fact, I still cannot. I am ashamed, Mr. L, and I hope that this warning will dissuade you. from further investigation of smile.jpg. You may in time encounter someone who is, if not weaker than I, then wholly more depraved, someone who will not hesitate to follow smile.dog's orders. Stop while you are still whole. Sincerely, Mary E. Terrence contacted me later that month with the news that his wife had killed herself.
Jesus.
While cleaning up the various things she'd left behind, closing email accounts and the like, he happened upon the above message. He was a man in shambles. He wept as he told me to listen to his wife's advice. He'd found the diskette, he revealed, and burned it until it was nothing but a stinking pile of blackened plastic. The part that most disturbed him, however, was how the diskette had hissed as it melted like some sort of animal. I will admit that I was a little uncertain about how to respond to this. At first, I thought perhaps it was a joke with the couple belatedly playing with the situation in order to get a rise out of me. A quick check of several Chicago newspapers' online obituaries, however, proved that Mary E. was indeed dead. There was, of course, no mention of suicide in the article. I decided that, for a time at least, I would not further pursue the subject of smile.jpg, especially since I had finals coming up at the end of May. But the world has odd ways of testing us. Almost a full year after I'd returned from my disastrous interview with Mary E., I received another email. This one is from a completely different person. And the subject is smile. It goes, "Hello. I found your email address through a mailing list. Your profile said you were interested in Smile Dog. I have saw it. It's not as bad as everyone says. I've sent it to you here. Just spreading the word." Smiley face. The final line chilled me to the bone. According to my email client, there was one file attachment called Naturally, smile.jpg. I considered downloading it for some time. It was mostly like a fake, I imagined. Even if it weren't, I was never wholly convinced of smile.jpg's peculiar powers. Mary E.'s account had shaken me, yes, but she was probably mentally unbalanced anyway. Rude. After all, how could a simple image do what smile.jpg was said to accomplish? What sort of creature was it that could break one's mind with only the power of the eye? And if such things were patently absurd, then why did the legend exist at all? If I downloaded the image, if I looked at it, and if Mary turned out to be correct, if smile.dog came to me in my dreams demanding I spread the word, what would I do? Would I live my life as Mary had, fighting against the urge to give in until I died, or would I simply spread the word, eager to be put to rest? And if I chose the latter route, how could I do it? Whom would I burden in turn? If I went through with my earlier intention to write a short article about smile.jpg, I decided I could attach it as evidence. And anyone who read this article, anyone who took interest would be affected. And even assuming the smile.jpg attached to the email was genuine, would I be capricious enough to save myself in that manner? Could I spread the word? Yes. Yes, I could. And at the bottom of the fucking story is the picture of the terrifying goddamn dog. It's awful. It's just like...
It's a dog that's smiling with human teeth.
It looks like... Okay, so the photo, we'll obviously post it later, is a Polaroid with bloody fingerprints on it.
Of course it is.
And there's the hand, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't look beckoning. It just looks like someone has their hand out, you know? It doesn't look like, come here. And then there's the picture of a husky with human teeth, and it's just sitting there smiling like a fucking creeper. But yeah, that's the story.
I will say the beginning of it is just a lot of, like, unnecessary language, but it does pick up steam near the end because it's focused. You can really tell. I'm really giving a critique on how the story was written more than the story itself, but like you can tell they started to get to the point, you know?
Yeah.
Rather than just going over like, I'm now going to describe in vivid detail with my pretentious vocabulary all the things that led up to these emails that were sent back and forth. So, it's definitely like the whole idea of the ring. Like, I'm going to share this with you now, and now it's going to poison your mind, and you have to share it too.
You have 7 days.
So, like, what the fuck happens once everyone knows it? Is the dog just like, thumbs up, rough?
I wonder if it takes over, you know.
Takes over what?
People's minds. Because it's...
All of them? I thought if you shared it...
If you keep sharing it, and it takes over enough people's minds, don't you think it would, like, gain this sort of power?
I thought it left you alone if you shared it.
She never shared it. You don't know.
I mean, he shared it. That's what I'm saying. Like,
but do we know what happens to him after?
If everyone were to share it, that's what I'm saying. Like, would it just go away, or would it be like, all right,
I don't think so.
Stage 2, no.
I think it would take over people's
Stage
minds.
1, collect underpants.
I think that's its whole goal, is to just take over people's minds.
Who knows? There's not really a lot of detail written towards that. It's just like creepy picture of a dog that you can see in your sleep and drives you crazy. And then a lot of pretentious writing about how terrifying it is. So either way, it's a good concept. And I thought it was a pretty good story.
Yeah.
So good stuff, Robin.
It's very long. Sorry, everyone.
Way to start us out. Good.
That's 30 minutes.
All right. So I'm going to move into my first creepypasta of the show. And this one's titled Ghost Train. I picked this one specifically because it reminds me of a Rick and Morty episode. So we'll see if that's what happens here. It starts out like this. The house I grew up in was right next to a set of busy railroad tracks. From my bedroom window, I could watch the trains roll by. There were 3 types of trains that used those tracks and still do to this day. There were the long, lumbering freight trains pulling boxcars, flatbeds, and tankers, which I would try and count as they clattered by. Then there were the fast-moving commuter trains of the Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, aka MATA, or the M, as some people called it, and Amtrak passenger trains that would breeze by, heading to and from Central Station in the heart of the city.
I will say, if you folks have never ridden an Amtrak train, I would recommend it, because riding a train is 1,000,000 times more comfortable than flying in a plane.
Or riding in a car. I like riding in a car for road trips, but when we did the train travel between Ohio and Indiana, that was pretty fucking sweet.
Great, because the seats are 1,000,000 times bigger than a plane, and it's just nice and quiet, and the views are nice, and you're not driving, so you're like, someone else is taking me there? This is amazing.
Like, every time I get on a plane and they make me drive, I'm like, ugh, again? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and keep going.
Fuck you! Fuck you. I hate you.
I was like following you with the comparisons to the fucking plane, and I was like,
because you said driving.
What? Okay, I'm gonna read now.
Fuck God.
Now, when most people see trains, they're just big machines rolling down ribbons of steel. But me, I saw trains as a symbol of freedom and a way out of the hood. Whenever I saw a train, I would imagine all the places it was going to and coming from. Naturally, my favorite toys as a tyke were my Thomas the Tank Engine toys. I had all the characters: Thomas, Percy, Gordon, James, Toby, Daisy, all of them.
This is adorable.
When I was 10, my grandparents bought me a Lionel train set for my birthday.
Are those nice train sets?
I think so. I didn't do too much research into trains before this, though. To me, it was the best present ever. It consisted of a steam engine and 4 passenger cars. There was even a small bottle of drops you'd put in the smokestack that allowed the engine to make smoke. That's
what?
Awesome. I'd spend hours watching that toy train run around in an oval, pretending it was real, and that I was driving the locomotive through forests, past fields, across mountains, and past small towns. I eventually developed other interests, namely girls. But I still never lost my interest in trains.
There are episodes of Young Sheldon where he loves playing with his little train set, because Sheldon from Big Bang Theory loves trains. In Young Sheldon, he's like, there's at a point where he's doing physics with the train, right? He launches a ball from one of the cars of the train, and then it like jumps and lands as the train's moving into that same car. It's impressive. Anyway, go on. I love trains.
When I got older, I applied for a job as an engineer trainee on MATA and got it.
Nice.
For me, it was a dream come true. After I took the required classroom courses and exams, I soon found myself riding in the cab of the sleek diesel engines that pull the commuter trains.
I forget that this is a creepypasta because I totally vibe with the author of this story.
So this one is definitely more authentic, and there's no vis-a-vis concordantly, blah, 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 blah. All right. Now, the way the trainee program was set up was that they'd have you ride on the different lines of the system for a few months with a regular engineer. I'd be on one line for a few weeks, and then I'd be assigned to another line in order to be familiar with the different routes. The M has 8 routes, all numbered. The main line is line 1, and all the branch lines are line 2, line 3, and so on. So glad "and so on" showed up in that sentence. I started on line 7 the first few weeks before being moved to line 8. Now, line 8, or the Cloverton line, as it is sometimes called, is one of the longest branch lines on the system, second only to line 2, aka the Miller Sport line. The first time I rode on line 8, I was with a veteran engineer named Hank. Now, Hank had been with the company from the beginning, when the old railroads decided they wanted out of the money-losing commuter services and handed all their locomotives and rolling stock to MATA. We had the, quote, night owl service, which starts at 7 p.m. and ends at 5 in the morning.
Sounds hot.
We picked up our first passengers at Central Station and were soon on our way to Cloverton. As we were going down the track, Hank turned to me and said, quote, there is something you should know if you're going to be working for this railroad, especially if they decide to put you here on Line 8 once they make you an official engineer.
We're a midnight meat train.
Fucking just shut up. Just shush. I looked at him and said, we're a midnight meat train. Not really. She thinks that's funny because it's her own joke and I told it back to her. That was the most brilliant thing you've ever said. I looked at him and said, oh, and what's that? Hank paused to blow the horn for a crossing and then said, this line is haunted. I replied, haunted? How is the line haunted? Hank looked at me. Go ahead. I heard you open your lips. You got something to say. Let's all pause for Robin.
I'm just like, Hank is probably just like, I'm a go.
If that's the twist, I'm going to be so pissed that you ruined it. Hank looked at me and said, it supposedly started with a curse. Back in the late 1800s, when one of the old railroad companies was building the line, the company built the line across the edge of an old farm that belonged to a man named Ezra Gray without his permission. Ezra demanded that the railroad remove the tracks from his property and relay them somewhere else, but the railroad refused due to it costing too much time and money to do so. Mr. Gray did try to sue the railroad, but was unsuccessful. You see, railroads were quite powerful back in those days, and the railroad had a lot of politicians and judges in their pocket. To add insult to injury, Ezra not only had to pay the court costs, but had to pay the railroad as well for all the money they spent on the legal proceedings. This bankrupted Ezra, and he was forced to sell the farm minus the small patch of land the tracks were built on, and Ezra Gray vowed to get even one way or another.
I would haunt the fuck out of that train.
When the line later opened up, Ezra stood on the tracks in front of the first train. The engineer tried to stop in time, but Ezra was hit anyway. This is just me saying this. You sure showed them.
What?
Before he died, Ezra cursed the line, saying it would bring death and sorrow. Ever since then, there were a lot of mishaps and accidents on these tracks, and many people lost their lives. It is believed that some of those who died haunt various spots, and that a few of the trains that crashed over the years come back as ghost trains, still rolling along these very rails we're on now.
You know, the thing about this story is it is 100% believable. I would believe that a train track was haunted by these set of events.
I would totally see like, oh, we built on someone's property, but just a little bit, and no one's going to give a shit. Like, that's a totally believable premise to me as well. All right, we're going to keep going. I looked at Hank as he blew the horn for another crossing. Have you seen any ghosts on this line? I asked. Plenty, he said. I've seen everything from headless trainmen to phantom lights and ghost trains. I didn't believe him at first, but didn't say anything. We eventually came to a curve in the track, and when we came out of it, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Coming at us was the headlight of another train. Hank, for God's sake, man, put the brakes on, I shouted. Don't you see the other train coming our way? Hank responded, yeah, I see it. Don't worry, we'll be fine. I looked at Hank and screamed, are you crazy? We're about to die. Hank just pointed straight ahead and said, no, we're not. Get a good look at that train. I did, and saw that not only did the oncoming engine have the shape of one of the older type diesels like you see in the photos, movies, and TV shows from the 50s and 60s, but it seemed to be transparent shadow with a headlight and lighted cab windows. What the? I started to say, but then that shadow train hit us. Well, not hit us exactly, more like passed through us. Our whole cab was surrounded by shadows and streaks of light as what looked to be a passenger train passed through, and I swear I saw the pale, wispy figures of people sitting in the seats.
That's creepy.
Soon it was gone, and the cab of our engine returned to normal. What the hell was that? I exclaimed. Hank turned to me and said that was one of the ghost trains I was talking about. Well, what's the story with that ghost train? I asked. Hank sighed, the deep sigh of someone who's going to be delivering a ton of exposition yet again, and said, well, it all happened shortly after MATA was established and took over the commuter rail lines. This guy's very well spoken and remembers a lot of very vivid details. An evening inbound train had just crested the long grade we're on right now when it lost control and ran away, all downhill before crashing and piling up on the curve at the bottom. Everyone on board was killed, and the cause of the wreck was blamed on the aging equipment Mata was using back then. Heck, with only a few exceptions, most of the engines Mata got from the old railroads were 25 to 30 years old. About 30% of the coaches were used that were even older. Not long afterward, the ghost of that train started making appearances along this stretch of track, becoming one of several ghost trains that haunt these rails. I looked at him, then out the front window of the engine. What about the people back in the cars? Do you think they just saw what we saw? I asked. Hank shrugged and said, probably. But I'm sure most of them are used to it, so I wouldn't worry too much. Our conductor is probably taking care of things right now. At this point, I will pause and say I would have said no, because it's just weird that you have a full train of people that are noticing this, and they're all just like, same shit, different day. We continued on to Cloverton and arrived on time. We made runs back and forth all night, and several times I saw some of the scary things that Hank told me about. I was relieved when we finally tied up in the yard, leaving the coaches on one side of the tracks and put the engine in the roundhouse. The next few nights, however, were hell. Every night run, I had at least a few creepy encounters along Line 8, all of them with Hank, who would just shrug them off as if they were nothing. But I guess that after nearly 40 years, none of the ghosts bothered him anymore. If he's a fucking ghost, I'm going to be so annoyed. After a few days, I was put on the day runs, which was a relief to me, and I didn't have to worry about seeing ghost trains or headless trainmen again. I eventually became a regular engineer and was put on the mainline run. I'm pretty content, but if the bigwigs for the M ever decide to put me on Line 8 Night Owl service, I'll quit. And
Choo-choo, motherfucker!
That is the end. Robin with her nice catchphrase at the end, too. That was written by Andrew Scolari, and I will say that had some wonderful detail put into it that made it sound like legit,
it was legit.
Authentic.
Yeah,
so.
I would believe that a train track like this was haunted. I will say it's unfortunate that the engineer he was working with that whole time was not a ghost, but
it's unfortunate it didn't have the most obvious twist ever. I'm glad it didn't. Thank you for not putting that in there.
I still really enjoy that story. That story was good. Thank you.
Same here. So before we move into our next story, we are going to take a really quick commercial break. And we're back.
So the next story I'm going to read is called The Rake, and it goes something like this. Well, it obviously goes like this. I'm literally reading the story. Okay.
It goes exactly like this.
During the summer of 2003, the year Adam graduated
That was my graduation summer. Pretty sweet summer.
Events in the northeastern United States involving a strange, human-like creature sparked brief social media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Blackout probably meaning like stop talking about it.
It was local media, by the way.
What did I say?
Social media. It basically didn't exist in the summer of 2003 yet. I think just like MySpace.
Oh, okay.
And I think maybe Facebook had started to kick off. But
brief local media interest. Social media works too. Doesn't matter. It's a chainmail. Anyway.
What?
Get it? Chainmail, MySpace, because MySpace existed back then. It's chainmail. Got it. I'm joking. Anyway. Little or
I'm
no.
wearing chainmail right now.
I want to learn how to make it. I think that'd be really cool. Little or no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed. Primarily focused in rural New York State, self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with a creature of unknown origin. Emotions ranged from extremely traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remained powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dated between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. Okay. There are only 8 in the entire world,
12th century is a long fucking time ago. Did you say continents?
Yeah.
How many? Pretty sure it's 7.
Is it 7?
Yeah.
Close enough.
If I'm wrong, then I'll feel really dumb, but
it doesn't fucking matter. Sure I don't know. Asia, North America, South America, Australia, Africa. Antarctica.
Australia.
I already said that.
Did you?
Yes.
Did you say Asia? Did you say Europe?
Europe.
That's 7?
That's 7.
You're done.
Yeah.
And the moon.
And the moon. That other continent. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some excerpts from their upcoming book. All right, so the book is called The Rake. There's a suicide note dated 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke and I felt his presence. and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. This note was found in the same wooden box where 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Linny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name.
That sucks.
No. A journal entry translated from Spanish from 1880. I experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice. And an unintelligible text. That's terrifying. Then there's a Mariners blog, not the baseball players, from 1691, which team didn't exist back then. He came to me in my sleep from the foot of my bed. I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake.
It's a weird name for a monster.
Then there's a post from a witness from 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip to Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets. Smart move.
This sounds authentic all of a sudden.
Only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something.
Have you ever considered the reason this thing is so angry is because it's a naked man, but you describe it as a large naked dog? If someone saw me naked and they're like, that could be a naked dog, I would be pretty pissed too.
You are really hairy, though.
I am. That's true.
For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed and then crawled quickly in the flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while. So this thing is up to the husband's face, but isn't he holding his wife?
He's in the fetal position. He's not holding his wife.
Okay,
He's holding his knees.
Gotcha. So this thing was just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' room. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter, Clara.
That's fucked up.
The creature had run down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the Rake." What the fuck? My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. He did not survive. So they see this thing, then their daughter's injured, she dies, but the husband's trying to take their daughter to the hospital. He dies by driving into the lake. That's messed up. All right. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now referred to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believe to be accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log, which is the one that I read. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the time of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This took almost an hour every day. What's funny about that is whenever I watch those Paranormal Activity movies, when they record what's happening and while they sleep, I always wonder why they never check daily.
Yeah, they're kind of idiots in those movies, so it's like,
oh my gosh,
we're having this paranormal thing happen, we're going to record all these different things.
But never check.
Also, I'm just not going to scrub through the tape. And if I do see something crazy, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm sure it was shadows or some shit.
On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and now I believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I've not seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. It's super creepy. There's a picture of it included with the story that we'll post later as well.
Yeah, that one's really good. It's really, really creepy. It's very morbid.
It's very straightforward.
There doesn't seem to be any, way to prevent this from happening, which always sucks when you have a story where it's like, also, if this happened, you're fucked. This is just, something you can't fight. But either way, I thought that one was really good.
Yeah, I agree. And that one is credited to a Brian Somerville. So thank you for writing that story.
Good job, Brian. I'm going to go ahead and move into my last and the last creepypasta of the show. And this one's called Please Stay Awake. And having read some of this already, it kind of sounds a little bit like Robin's. So we're going to go ahead and jump in there. Dark, cold, and eerie.
That's my soul, yes.
Those are the only words I can come up with to describe the house in which I had lived with my family for the majority of my life. Mostly dark, blistering cold during the winter, and always eerie. Sometimes there would be strange noises coming from the cellar, too. It had often given me the creeps, though. I would never admit that to my mother. I'd figure I was too old to let some silly noises scare me anyway. I had been trying to act like the man of the house ever since my dad left when I was 7.
Aww.
I had always hoped I would never turn out like my father, whom I hated with a burning passion. As far as he goes, I suppose I'd better just leave it at that. I live in the house with my mother, Linda. It's my mom's name, too. And my uncle, Kevin. That's not my uncle's name.
That's my dad's name.
On a vast piece of land in Steinen, Indiana. Indiana? Steinen was a tiny piece of shit in the middle of nowhere. That's how you know you're from Indiana, is when you describe where you're from as a tiny piece of shit in the middle of nowhere.
Wow, that's fucked up, dude.
Nobody liked living there. I didn't have any friends because I was homeschooled, and I'd never even seen another kid my age in Steinen.
It's interesting when people are homeschooled because they just don't have that experience, that social interaction with other kids their age. It's really, I don't know. I just want other people to hang out with other kids.
And I'd never even seen another kid my age in Steinen since we almost never left the house unless my mom had to go into town to buy groceries. However, I was always very close to Uncle Kevin. When I was little, he would tell me ghost stories right before bed, which my mother hated. Stop it, Kev. You're going to give him nightmares, she would snap. Oh, I did get nightmares indeed, and sometimes it seemed as though the nightmares refused to end. They crept into the back of my mind like a spider crafting its web. The story he told most often was one about a monster with a contorted body and black eyes. According to legend, in quotes, as Uncle Kevin called it, even though I know he made it up himself. The monster would come into your room if you were awake past your bedtime and hide in your closet, watching you the whole night. Of course, this was just a silly little tale that Kevin would tell me, so I wouldn't stay up late. Even so, I can't tell you how many times that horrible creature has popped into my head over the years.
That's the point of cautionary tales, to scare you to do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, scare you into doing something that you should do or you shouldn't do, to not do the thing you shouldn't do. On this particular night, I decided to go to bed in an attempt to sleep off a pounding headache. I lied down on my icy bed and sank underneath the covers, hiding my face from whatever may have been lurking inside of my head. After setting my glasses down on the nightstand beside my bed, I reached over and flicked the light off. The darkness made me feel alive in a very strange way, almost as though I was mesmerized by the nothingness. As I looked around the room, seeing almost nothing but the pitch black darkness surrounding me, I felt entranced, as if something was forcing me to look. Of course, there was nothing to look at least not with the eyes.
How do you look at something without?
This was something you could only witness within the deepest corridors of your mind. The part of she does this when we watch movies too. The part of your mind that you always dread visiting and can never seem to return from. Out of nowhere, I began to hear scratches upon the window above my bed. My eyes immediately burst open and I feel like I was unable to close them again. What the fuck was that? I asked myself. Nothing. Of course it was nothing. It couldn't have been anything, right? Right. Just my mind playing tricks on me in the dark. No big deal. But in a moment of childish curiosity, I decided to peer out the window just to make sure I was hearing nothing more than a tree branch brushing up against the glass. But then it hit me like a bag of bricks. There's no tree next to my window. Still, I decided it would be better to sleep it off and think about it more in the morning. It was probably all in my head. It had to be. I found it unusually difficult to fall asleep that night, as if somebody or something was trying to keep me up. I woke up the next morning with that sound still locked in my brain. It had to have been coming from somewhere, but where? Shit, I had no idea. But then I remembered the cellar. I built up as much courage as I could muster and slowly crept down into the abyss. Jesus, I hadn't been down there in a year, maybe longer. I had almost forgotten what it looked like. Nothing but clouds of cobwebs and stacks of cardboard boxes shoved against the walls. I rustled through a couple of boxes until I stumbled upon a picture I'd drawn when I was a child. It was a sketch of a grotesque creature. It definitely wasn't human. This thing barely even had a face, just dark black eyes and no mouth. Its body was tall and thin and was contorted into a shape that I had never even seen before. The more I looked at the drawing, the more I was reminded of that story my uncle used to tell me. It appeared to be raining above the creature, and toward the bottom of the paper I had scribbled, "Please stay awake," in giant letters. I didn't know what the hell that was supposed to mean, but I folded up the paper and stuffed it into my pocket. I quickly made, this is like good, like the plot just thickened right there.
This is like a good story.
I quickly made my way up the staircase into the kitchen and went about my day as usual, keeping that drawing in my mind, trying to remember what it meant and why I'd drawn it in the first place. I looked outside and noticed that it had begun to rain. Uh-oh. I didn't want to think about the creature any longer, so I walked into my dimly lit room and plopped onto my bed. I fell asleep before I even knew it.
It's like they drew what was going to happen that day.
Like a long time ago.
Yes.
When I awoke, it was exactly 3 a.m.
Of course it was.
This night was colder and darker than usual. The farm was soaked with rain from earlier in the evening. The moon was full and radiant. It almost didn't look real. For an instant, I glanced out my bedroom window and I could swear I saw something walking quickly through the yard. When it spotted me, it slunk behind a tree as if it were trying to hide from me. It looked exactly like what I had drawn when I was a child. I ran into Uncle Kevin's room and began shaking him awake. "Kevin! Kevin!" He rubbed the rheum out of his eyes. R-H-E-U-M? Is that like the crap that you have in your eyes when you're sleeping?
I guess. Maybe the REM room?
I don't know.
REM?
"What's up, bud?" "It's late," he asked, bewilderment at my excitement. I looked him in his bloodshot eyes and softly said, "I saw someone in the yard." Kevin looked at me with hesitation. "No, you probably just saw an animal. Get back to bed." Wow, way to be an adult.
Right?
I know what I saw. This was no animal, or at least not one that I had ever seen, not even in my worst fucking nightmares. I knew I couldn't tell him exactly what I had seen, as he would never believe me. No, Kevin, it was not an animal. Please. It was a man. I think. Look, please just go and check. Uncle Kevin leapt up and grabbed his shotgun from under the bed. All right, come on. Show me where he is. Let's try not to wake your mom. I'll scare the fucker off. We went outside and I pointed to the tree. I whispered to Kevin, I saw him go behind that tree. My uncle bravely walked up to the tree and peered around it. Nothing. He searched the entire farm for well over half an hour, but he never found anyone or anything. Let's go back in, bud. There's no one out here. Keep the doors locked tonight. Just tonight? Keep the doors locked, period. He was wrong. I knew there was something out there. I crawled into bed and threw the covers over my face. I could hear the blistering wind coming from outside. It pierced my ears with a whistle that I thought only dogs could detect. Suddenly, I heard a tapping sound upon my window.
No.
The sound grew louder with each tap. I tightened the blankets around my body. The taps slowly turned into knocks. Louder and faster the knocks became. The knocks turned into bangs. I thought the glass was going to break. Then, out of nowhere, it stopped. No more taps, no more knocks, no more bangs, no more wind. I was relieved. Suddenly, I heard a low, chilling voice in my ear.
No.
Please stay awake.
Fuck that.
It couldn't be. No, it couldn't be.
Time to take some sleeping pills.
I ran into the hallway, ready to make my way to my mother's room when I saw it. Whatever it was, I still don't know. It was holding Kevin's lifeless, mangled body in its arms. You heard Robin react because she reads my story before I get to read it. Carved deeply into my uncle's torso were the words, please stay awake. I tried to let out a scream, but only silence filled the dead air. I sprinted through the door of my mother's bedroom and saw her body lying in the middle of the floor. She was covered in blood and her left arm had been ripped straight out of its socket. Written next to her in her own blood were the words, please stay awake. I began to sob, and when I turned around, the creature was gone. I don't know where the hell it went, and I'm not sure I want to. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and let out the loudest scream I could muster. I called the police and lied down on the cold, now blood-soaked floor, waiting for them to arrive. It felt like hours. Finally, the police showed up to find me in the fetal position next to my mother's corpse.
That's so messed up,
I told them everything I saw. I showed them my drawing. I told them about the taps, the knocks, the bangs. I told them what I'd seen outside, but of course, they wouldn't hear a word of it. Why would they? All they could see was a lonely kid hovering over his dead mother, her blood covering my clothes almost as much as it covered the floor. It's cold in this cell. It's dark and lonely. The silence is the only saving grace. Constant, peaceful silence. Tonight, it's raining outside. It's colder and darker and wetter than ever. But unfortunately, I must stop writing now. I just heard a tap on my window.
So they were arrested for killing their mom.
Correct. That's what it sounds like to me, at least. And now they're in jail. And now this thing's coming after them.
They're either in jail or in a mental institution.
And it's a cell, so I think that makes it sound like jail.
Jail?
Because I don't think they call them cells when you're in a mental institution. But either way, it's definitely super terrifying. I have way more questions about the creature, and I just want to know a little bit more. But either way, it was a really good twist when they went in the basement and they found, like, the whole creature that was from the uncle's stories. Like, how did the uncle know about the creature?
Yes, I want to know more about the uncle's tie to the creature, because he kept telling the story of this entity.
And did the creature kill them because they stayed awake? Or did the creature kill them because they fell asleep? Because if he wrote, please stay awake on the piece of paper when he was a kid, was that a message that he was trying to tell himself? Or was he writing that because that's just something the creature used to say all the time to him when he was apparently a kid? I don't fucking know.
Who knows?
And the creature's still sending this message because it's not like Kevin carved the message into his own chest, you know?
Right.
So it's like, is it better to stay awake? Because if you stay awake past your bedtime, then the creature can come get you? I don't know. Lots of questions about this one, but either way, I thought it was really good. Definitely morbid, definitely creepy. So.
Makes me want to go to sleep on time tonight.
Right? Which never happens. She goes to sleep between 4 and 5 every single night. So, well, most nights. But yeah, that is the last creepypasta of the episode. So thank you to everyone who wrote a story that we read. You'll probably never listen to it on this show, but either way, we appreciate it. If you think the fucking people who write creepypastas are listening to Scariest right now?
Maybe.
If you do, that's awesome. Thank you so much for writing it. If you have a creepypasta, like a short fictional story that's horror-oriented that you would like to send us, please email pastatime@scarish.com or hit us up on any of our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Or you can hit us up through our website, scarish.com. Go to scarish.com, click on contact us, fill out that form. It comes directly to us. Be sure to note that it's a Pastatime if it's going through anything but the Pastatime email. Good stuff. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Those are monthly donations. There are tiers that start at $1 a do. At $1 a do, you get ad-free episodes. You can't go wrong. Ad-free. It's great. And there's also...
Ad-free's the place to be, as Robin said the last time.
Did I?
And you're like, that's genius. I should say that.
Goddamn genius. I'm lyrical wordsmith. No, there's also physical merch tiers. I'm sending out stickers in this next month, for everybody that's $10 and above. If you're not into the monthly tier thing, you can also go to ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. Those are one-time donations. All your donations go to helping us upgrade our studio setup, keep us going, keep us making more content, keep us... Wait, did I already say motivated? You guys keep us motivated. Thank you so much.
Indeed. So, thank you one more time to everyone who listens, everyone who supports us. You mean the world to us. And that's everything we have for this episode of Pastatime. So, Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you folks later.
Bye-bye.